This series was made possible thanks to the generosity of these patrons and from the likes and watch time of viewers like you. Thank you for your support.
Read the disclaimers, and please use common sense.
While I was taking some time away from this channel, I came to a bit of an epiphany while watching fellow small reviewer Gay for May. And that epiphany is, when you think about it, the Generations line is like a cover band. I'll explain that analogy in a minute, because right now, we've got a particularly divisive cover to, cover. Greetings, inhabitants of the internet. I'm Firebyte27, and let's begin our analysis of Transformers Legacy Prime Universe Bulkhead. With a side of salt.
Now, for some context behind my, quite frankly, bizarre analogy, a cover band is basically a band that will go around and remake old songs, often with a modern twist. Transformers Generations, meanwhile, seeks to make new figures of old characters, often with updated engineering and occasionally newer designs. And in that context, I think the comparison is very apt. Sure, they may put out some baller original things every now and then, but it's mostly about modernizing the classics. Haha, how hilariously original of me, I know. Moving on. In a way, it's kinda like copying the homework of the smartest kid in the classroom under the condition that you change around the vocabulary a bit so the teacher doesn't exactly catch on to the fact that you copied them. However, saying that they're lesser because of that copying kinda undersells just how powerful a change in vocabulary can be. Because a cover or update can take something that was good that people liked and turn it into something that's great that people love, or something so amazing that it superannuates the original. Unfortunately, given that you are copying someone else's work to an extent, you have nimrods who are assuming that it's going to be easy to make these, simply because, well, it's just as easy as running the old thing through an AI. Herk, herk, herk. Wrong. First of all, if you think that AI is currently capable of making artistic choices on the same level as a normal human, then you are exactly half as intelligent as one of these two football players. Sure, technology can help make the process faster, however, you don't want to leave everything up to the program, otherwise you're going to have a bunch of unnecessary jank. Especially when you have such a bad grasp on the technology that you use it for a purpose it wasn't even designed for. A good example that I'm showing on screen right now is 60 FPS anime that's made by using programs designed for live action film. There's such a massive gap between what the program was meant to do and what the user intends for it to do that it ends up ruining the final product. In short, I end up feeling fucking disgusted by the practice. Okay, how the fuck was my hatred of 60 FPS anime relevant to the review? Bringing it back to Transformers, a great example of this is Earthrise Starscream, which was basically an upscaled version of the classic Seeker mold. And because there's been such a massive time gap between Classics 2006 and Earthrise, you can't really justify the lingering jank that comes from reusing decades-old engineering. However, you can remove a lot of that jank through making your own creative decisions. In the case of a song, maybe you change the pace so it's faster, or slower. You could change the genre so it's more in line with your brand. Or maybe you change the tempo or even go so far as to change some of the lyrics so it fits more in line with your vision. And Transformers also possess a similar range of creative decision making, like what kind of source material do you want to draw from? There's obviously the Sunbow cartoon models, the toys, the box art for the toys, not to mention the various comics we've gotten over the years, so really anything goes, man. If you're retooling something, how far do you have to go to get character A to not feel like character B? How accurate do you want to be to your source material? Do you want to make absolutely no deviations? A few deviations? Do you want to reinvent the wheel altogether? Hey, it's your choice, man. Maybe the character never transformed on screen or in comics, so you have to give them one alternate mode, or multiple alternate modes. Hell, maybe they didn't even have a robot mode. The choice is yours, and with it, you'll remove a lot of the problems people may have had with the original. However, like with all forms of media, there are bound to be a few duds. A creator may not be skilled enough technically to accomplish what they want, sometimes a company may interfere on the artist's behalf and screw around with the final product, and sometimes corporate mandates and fan criticisms can often lead to a product becoming lesser through mixed priorities. And then there's the updates that feel so tonally and stylistically disconnected from the original that you have to wonder if the creator actually knew what song or figure they were remaking. Kinda like every single Michael Bay design. And while Prime Universe Bulkhead might be the victim of some similar backlash, I don't feel it's for the same reasons that I just mentioned. This isn't on the creators for delivering a poor final product, it's on the corporation for having the wrong marketing and the fans for having the wrong expectations. Wow, nearly 6.5 minutes in, and I have only just mentioned the figure. Jeez, I'm out of practice. Anyways, the first thing that sticks out about Prime Universe Bulkhead's vehicle mode is that this flat out isn't Prime Bulkhead's vehicle mode. Prime Bulkhead turned into an SUV, not a military truck. If anything, that makes him an animated universe Bulkhead. And even with that choice in alt mode, I really can't call it an animated Bulkhead either, because look at it. No, it's not animated Bulkhead. 2/3 of animated Bulkhead definitely wasn't tarp, and the cab was nowhere near this boxy, but I actually prefer it this way. And it's for a very simple reason. It feels unique, as though it's not trying to perfectly replicate animated or Prime Bulkhead and just do its own thing. And believe me, this will come back to why I'm ultimately a little salty about this release. Although spoiler warning, it doesn't really have anything to do with the figure itself. Of course, I know that sounds contradictory, but don't worry, things will make a lot more sense by the end of this video. Well, either that or I've gotten so far off track now that you've decided to click off my video from sheer boredom. In which case, whoops! Getting back to that point that I somehow seem to keep misplacing, I'd say the word unique actually describes this figure pretty well, which to many people might sound absolutely ridiculous and completely false. It lacks a lot of the elements that make the Prime series, which it allegedly comes from, unique. If this really is a Prime incarnation of Bulkhead, then where are the dynamic angles of the series? Where's the aggressive vibe that makes this feel like a Bulldog? Even when they started making massive deviations and even just making up their own bullshit for the Beast Hunters subline, they really didn't stray that far away from the original angular dynamic aesthetic of the show and the original toy line. That unique dynamic look was probably a result of them mixing the aesthetics of the G1 cartoon and the live-action movies. And as such, this figure has absolutely no right to be called unique in any way whatsoever. It rejects the fundamental uniqueness of its source material, the thing that it is very much named after, and instead replaces it with the boring, homogenized G1 brickiness. Okay, I hear you. This figure is very much a G1-ified Bulkhead. However, I still feel as though it's unique for a single motif in the sculpting that I like to call faux roundedness. A motif that I don't feel I've seen any other figure do to this extent. Unfortunately, I don't think I can do a very good job of showing off that motif in this mode specifically. It's much more prevalent in robot mode. So for now, I say we just stick a pin in this argument until later. Or at the very least, just stick a pin into the majority of the arguments I have in favor of this faux roundedness. because I think it is one of the best elements of this figure. Now, because I have a feeling this term is very me-specific, I'm just going to describe faux roundedness as a quality at where an item looks as though it's rounded from a distance, but when you get up close, it really isn't, as the pixel art circle that I'm showing you currently hopefully demonstrates. I'll even take it a step further by ruining every single 3D animation and video game you've ever seen. You see here, none of the things that you see in video games are actually round. They're just points that are connected together, mostly in the form of triangles. It's why the term polycount exists, because you're literally counting up the number of polygons it took you to make a rounded object. In the case of Bulkhead, basically every single perpendicular angle has been removed from the figure, leaving us with a slightly more rounded octagonal shape. And that minor alteration to the shape of the truck, plus its overall green color, does help differentiate it from a majority of the truck formers I own. Even when he's lined up next to similar truck formers, there's no mistaking him for anyone else. He's not green grapple. This is Legacy Bulkhead, and this is Legacy Bulkhead's alternate mode. And I have to commend them for finding a way to make this vehicle mode somewhat unique. And hey, something that I find equally, if not more commendable about this vehicle mode is its sheer cohesion. Now, on some level, it's always kind of expected that a vehicle or robot mode will have some kind of kibble. Despite what some lunatics will tell you, the sad truth is that incompatibility between a vehicular shape and a humanoid robot shape is inevitable. And I've definitely shown off a few epic fails at cohesion in the past, but Bulkhead's underside feels remarkably clean, especially for a mainline transformer. The sides are also remarkably clean, and even have an extra feature which I'm sure some of you have noticed, because I have. Minicon ports!
Actually, that's a...
Shut up! Minicons and energon weapons use the same kind of port, you f***head! Even the truck cab, which is literally being double-fisted, is actually pretty cohesive, once as you've gotten the fists turned around. Gotta say, they make for some pretty convincing seats. However, there just had to be that one tiny itty-bitty part that screwed it up, and in this case, it was the back of the truck. That's not to say the back of the truck is terrible. In fact, it's an ingenious use of weapon storage. However, ingenious does not always mean good. Not only is it very gappy from behind, but it's also a great display of this vehicle mode's Achilles heel. Or rather, it's Achilles' tarp. Now then, controversial opinion incoming, I don't usually mind parts forming. I've seen a lot of plebs in the TF community reacting to parts forming as though it were the spawn of Dio himself, but I can't say I agree. Then again, I don't see why faux parts are a cardinal sin either. Well, most of the time. And Bulkhead is one of the few examples where I do find parts forming bothersome. And the reason this parts forming bothers me so much is because without the tarp, well, look at it! He is literally presenting his ass to the entire world while he is down on his knees like your mother last night! And honestly, this vehicle mode is so ugly without the tarp that I kinda wish they hadn't bothered at all. You know, just given it a traditional transformation. The worst part is that apparently the tarp's pegs aren't even for minicons. They're apparently for this stupid hammer that's coming with the Reckoned Rule Collection variant of this figure. Also, side note, apparently the deco on that figure is a reference to Age of Extinction Hound, but I don't care because it literally and appropriately makes him look as though he's covered in dog shit. Back on topic, I don't actually mind this use of weapon storage. I think it's clever and cute and also not too bothersome. And with the way that the two weapons just slide away and then are covered by the tarp, it just makes it feel like a cute little lunchbox. And speaking of boxes, it's time to address a few concerns that have been floating around our community. Or more specifically, concerns surrounding the recent modifications to Transformers packaging for the sake of quote-unquote environmentalism. Now, I will give Hasbro the credit they deserve. This initiative started off strong, mostly by removing the plastic bubbling surrounding the figure, It's where the majority of plastic waste in the packaging came from, and they were right to remove it. Our first taste of this new environmentally minded initiative came last year with the Transformers Kingdom figures, where instead of plastic bubbles holding the figures in the box, we got cardboard cutouts that held the figures in place. And then this year, they also removed the plastic windows from the packaging. However, unlike before, this removal of plastic waste caused some backlash. And rightfully so, I might add. For starters, that's the only plastic waste they removed. They didn't remove that plastic hook at the top of the box that keeps the figure hanging off the pegs at the store. They didn't remove the plastic ties that keep the figure secured inside of the box. And Lord knows that they did not remove those stupid little plastic discs on the inside of the packaging that keep the aforementioned ties from puncturing the cardboard backing. The next issue we were right to point out is that kids are really stupid. They'll be able to reach in through those big damn open windows and get the figures covered in grease and whatever the heck kids have on their hands these days. And then there was the biggest issue.
I'll steal it! No one will ever know!
If you need me to spell it out, they'd basically be helping shoplifters. However, I can reassure you, this is not the case. And to give you a live demonstration, here's me!
I am going to try and see just how secure the new Legacy boxes are by trying to pull Bulkhead out of the box. Fair warning, I am a bit of a wimp, so this could take a while if I don't decide to give up first. This is just to give you some idea of how difficult it's going to be for people to actually steal these, by the way. Yeah, I give up.
Which I thought proved my point right up until...
Ah, here we go again.
So, yeah, sorry about that. Guess the only other thing I can offer as a condolence is that, well, he might be a bit too wide to pull out of his box? Okay, that was a terrible segue into the size comparisons. Anyways, here's Legacy Bulkhead next to last review, Kingdom Core Class Soundwave, Prime Robots in Disguise Bulkhead, Animated Jazz, Reveal the Shield Lugnut, Studio Series Brawn, Studio Series Ratchet, Legacy Skids, Legacy Blaster, and of course, a standard Cutana, standard can of sparkling water, and Broadside. In conclusion, I can't say that I love Bulkhead's vehicle mode in the ways I wanted to, but I love it all the same. And more importantly, I feel that it did its mission well, and that mission was capturing the spirit of the original Bulkhead. Okay, the one that wasn't blatantly 2/3 a Springer ripoff. Right away, I can say that if you're a die-hard Prime fan, then this robot mode is going to leave you steamed. There's little to nothing at all here connecting it back to Prime's aesthetic, and in that sense, it has failed at living up to its title as a quote-unquote Prime Universe Bulkhead. Some may even go so far as to call this a G1 bastardization of Bulkhead. Like I said earlier, it ignores the core fundamentals of what makes Prime's aesthetic so unique. However, that's not how I roll on this channel. While it's not animated and certainly not Prime, I can safely say that it's doing what the Generations line was originally trying to do. Update Bulkhead. The best comparison is a figure with a similar ideology, that being Reveal the Shield Lugnut. This figure asks a question. What if Lugnut was somewhat more photorealistic? Legacy Bulkhead asks, what if Bulkhead was designed in 1984 instead of 2007? What if he first starred in a cheaply made 80s kids show instead of a decently animated mid-2000s kids show? The results wouldn't look the same, wouldn't feel the same, but they'd be worthy of Bulkhead's title all the same. And while I do think that it is worthy of that title, it's not without a huge freaking caveat, and that is, it's only worthy of the title Bulkhead and not Prime Bulkhead. And I say that because it honestly feels like they only called this Prime Universe Bulkhead because someone on the marketing team didn't have any faith in this figure whatsoever. So they just decided to, slap Prime on there and hope that would sell a few more copies. And that's why several months later I am still salty. Not because it's inaccurate, but because someone didn't have the faith that I'd buy it unless they lied to me. Though considering I bought this figure off a scalper, I guess the joke's on both of us. Of course, now that I've gotten all that fucky turducky contextual baggage out of the way, Bulkhead's robot mode actually rules. In fact, I'd say that this robot mode does a better job of capturing the spirit of the original Bulkhead than actual Prime Bulkhead. Again, by original, I mean animated, not energon. As stated earlier, the aesthetic of Transformers Prime is very spiky, while animated is very round and smooth. As stated earlier, thanks to faux roundedness removing all of his hard edges, he feels a lot rounder and softer than he really is. And I think that we can all agree that soft and round are two of the best descriptors for animated Bulkhead. Well, animated Bulkhead plus the entire show's art style in general. And honestly, his equipment isn't hurting my case either. With the gun being a glaring exception. First of all, we have the mace hand, which, full disclosure, is more of a Bulkhead hallmark than it is a animated reference, but I feel this particular design for the hand mace is more in line with his animated weapon than it is with his Prime weapon. It's got a lot fewer spikes is what I'm saying. And in a Bulkhead family first, he's got a shield, which no previous incarnation has had, but I feel is the most appropriate weapon that this figure comes with. Animated Bulkhead was clumsy, but selfless, and I think he'd choose a shield over a mace any day of the week just so he could protect his friends. Sure, it's not gonna stop the bad guys from getting away anytime soon, but it is going to help him protect his friends, because to him, their lives are worth more than his reputation. Even if it gets him kicked out of the Autobot Academy by Sentinel Prime, he's still gonna go through with it, because he's just that loyal to his friends. And his friends are that loyal to him too, and will most likely quit the Academy as well just because of Sentinel Prime's dickery. All the while insulting Sentinel Prime's stupid face. Sure, I am extrapolating between the lines in order to get at the character motivations of animated Bulkhead just so I can justify this piece of parts forming, but I don't think that's the only reason I enjoy the shield. For starters, it's one of his most versatile weapons in terms of where you can attach it. There's one peg that lies just beneath the viewing hole in the shield, so you can attach it there and also attach it to the back when it's in truck mode. You've also got a peg beneath that which flips out and can allow you to attach it from either side. Then you've got the two mini-con ports on the sides that you can mount it from. On top of that, the flaps can be configured two different ways. The default configuration basically is the version that goes over the back of the truck, but then we've got the more armored configuration, where the flaps have been turned to the other side and reveal some metal plating detail, making it look like a much sturdier shield. And while this is all great, it does possess one of the most baffling issues I've ever seen on a figure in my life. Bulkhead cannot hold it in his hands. As I am currently demonstrating, he cannot hold it in his hands normally. Now let me be clear, by this I only mean that the figure cannot properly hold it in his hands themselves. You can still attach the shield to places such as the shoulder. However, in order to get it into a place that would be most effective, both for combat reasons and also preventing interference with the articulation, you can't really do anything except for attach it to the wrecking ball. And to me, that just seems slightly ridiculous. Like, why would you limit yourself to just a shield? Surely dual wielding it with a melee weapon would be more effective. It's honestly a complete and utter conundrum, one that there's no real good answer to. By prioritizing the shield, you're basically erasing the mace from existence. And by prioritizing the mace, you're basically losing all the benefits of the shield. It's also incredibly thin, leading to these ridiculous stress marks on the hinges. Adding to that, in some ludicrous twist of fate, the clear plastic is the only plastic on this figure I haven't managed to stress out or break. But even with all of those faults, I still really like this figure. And I also really like the shield. Though Lord knows that the internet tried its hardest to ruin the shield for me, mostly by, well,
Among Us!
Houston, our cringe capacity is at its limit. Now, a question that I ran into frequently while I was filming and editing this episode is, do we actually need updated Prime figures? Especially with how the Prime First Edition figures exist still. And after thinking about it for a long time, I have decided that yes, we do need new and better figures of the Prime characters. In my experience, while the First Edition molds were great for the period they released in, unfortunately, I cannot say that they have stood the test of time, especially with regards to their engineering and articulation. Second, and more importantly, while I'd love to be able to buy the Prime First Edition figures, I'm pretty sure I'd have to find and also sell enough kidneys to breach the Geneva Conventions. As such, I'd like to propose a method of releasing new versions of the Prime toys that are more accurate and better engineered. Let's release them under the Studio Series line in a subline similar to SS86. Maybe theme it around Predacons Rising, the TV movie that was released, in order to coincide with Prime. Plus, we really wouldn't have to worry about retools or repaints because, well, figures in the Studio Series rarely get retooled or repainted. But while it would be cool, I doubt Hasbro will ever do it. It's just too much of a risk for them. Anyways, that's enough of me trying to tell Hasbro how they should run their business. On to Articulation.
Bulkhead's head is on a ball joint, shoulders are on universal joints, biceps rotate, elbows bend, wrists rotate, waist rotates, hips are on universal joints, thighs rotate, knees bend, ankles tilt, and toes bend.
And before we wrap things up, let's do size comparisons. Here's Legacy Bulkhead next to Kingdom Soundwave, Prime RID Bulkhead, Animated Jazz, Reveal the Shield Lugnut, Studio Series Brawn, Studio Series Ratchet, Legacy Skids, Legacy Blaster, and of course a standard Kutama, standard can of sparkling water, and Fraudside. I was honestly going into this review expecting to absolutely dunk on this figure to no end. However, I can safely say that this G1ification of Prime has won me over. I remain cautiously optimistic about how RC and Knockout will be, but for now, this has won me over.
Despite the less than optimal first impression I got of this figure from its promo images, I'd say that Prime Universe Legacy Bulkhead has won me over. I won't say that it's a great Prime Bulkhead, but it is a good figure of Bulkhead as a character. Granted, I still have some lingering salt in me over the fact that this is evidently a pre-tool for something. I don't know what it's a pre-tool for. And some people are guessing that it's a pre-tool for Beast Hunters Prime, which I think that would be cool, but I seriously doubt it. But as it stands, this figure has done a great job of being a palate cleanser for all the salt. Like a giant, ridiculous, green mint lifesaver. And because of that palate cleanse, I am more than happy to award it a 9.5 out of 10. And this isn't like Kingdom Cheetor where I awarded it a high score because I wanted it to sell well. It's because I genuinely feel that this is a great figure that is worth adding to your collection. Provided you aren't bothered by the fact that it's not particularly based on Prime Bulkhead, which, considering I just love Bulkhead, isn't an issue for me. Special thanks once again to Master Far, Ruben Soto, and Gay for May. If you want to check out each and every one of those guys, links to their channels will be in the description. And that being said, this is Firebyte 27, over and out. Catch you next time!